Have you ever wondered what the actual blueprint for a society built on Islamic principles looks like? I mean, if we strip away all the modern headlines and just look at the foundational ideas, well, that's what we're going to do. Let's dive in and explore the source code of an Islamic civilization, from its core beliefs all the way to how it structures a government. But let me start by asking you this. What do you think is the real glue that holds any society together? Is it a constitution, a shared language or culture? Or is it something deeper, like a shared answer to the question, what's the point of it all? Just keep that in the back of your mind as we go through this. All right, to really understand the building, we have to start with the foundation. So what exactly is a civilization in this context? Let's break that down first. So, according to Dr. Mustafa Al-Sabai, a civilization is basically a social system that helps people ramp up their cultural output. And cultural output isn't just about art and fancy buildings. We're talking about everything a society produces. Its science, its laws, its family structures, its moral traditions, the whole shebang. And it really boils down to these 5 key elements. A true civilization gives you a way to understand the world, right? It defines your ultimate goal in life, it sets down fundamental beliefs, shapes how people are raised and educated, and then builds a whole collective system, laws, politics, you name it, on top of that. It's a complete package for how to live. Okay, so if that's the what, then what about the where? Where does this specific blueprint actually come from? Where is the source code written down? For this framework, it's all built on 2 primary sources, the Quran, which is considered the literal word of God, and the Sunnah, which is the example, the teachings, and the entire life of the Prophet Muhammad. Now, this is a crucial point. These aren't seen as human philosophies that someone just came up with. They're understood as a divinely revealed code for life. And this idea is captured perfectly in a saying attributed to the Prophet himself. The message is clear. These 2 sources are the ultimate guide, the anchor for the entire civilization. So the legitimacy of the whole system flows directly from these texts. So let's see how this all gets translated into a political structure. How do you take these sources and build a government out of them? All right, this is the absolute starting point, the number 1 principle, and it changes everything. It's the idea that ultimate sovereignty, the absolute right to rule and make laws, belongs to God and only God. Not to a king, not to a parliament, not even to the people. So if God is the ultimate sovereign, where do humans fit in? Well, that brings us to this concept called khilafat, or vicegerency. In this view, humans are basically deputies, or you could say trustees on earth. The job isn't to invent new laws out of thin air, but to implement the divine code that's already there. Think of it like a manager running a company on behalf of the owner. And this is where it gets really interesting, especially when you compare it to other systems we're more familiar with. Under this idea of caliphate, authority is a trust given to the entire community. It's not the exclusive birthright of one person or one family. And that means rulers are accountable, both to God and to the people. They are not above the law. That's a world away from a monarchy, where power is just inherited and absolute. In fact, the source material puts it really bluntly. It says, this model is the antithesis, the total opposite of a theocracy or a monarchy. And the argument is that because this authority is a collective right of the people, not held by some special priestly class or a king with divine right, it's a fundamentally different kind of system. So you've got rulers who are basically accountable trustees. But how do you make sure they're doing their job right? How do you prevent that trust from being abused? What are the checks and balances? The key mechanism here is a principle called shura, which means consultation. And this isn't just a friendly suggestion or a nice idea. It's a binding obligation. The state is actually required to run its affairs by consulting with the community or its representatives on all the important stuff. And for this whole consultation thing to be legitimate, there are some pretty clear rules. You need to have full freedom of expression so people can say what they really think. Nobody can be forced or pressured. The advice has to be based on knowledge and a clear conscience, not just personal gain. And at the end of the day, the consensus that's reached should be respected. This leads us right into the social contract. What are the specific rights of a citizen living in a state like this, and what are their obligations in return? Okay, let's start with the rights, because these are presented as non-negotiable guarantees. We're talking about fundamental protections, the security of your life and your property, the protection of your personal honor, and really importantly, freedom of conscience and an absolute right to justice. And the list keeps going. covering all sorts of social and civil liberties. You've got freedom of association, protections for religious feelings, and a big one, equal treatment for everyone under the law. But check out that last one, the right of the poor and destitute to have their basic needs met by the state. This isn't framed as optional charity. It's presented as a fundamental right. Now, for the other side of that coin. In return, citizens have some clear responsibilities. They're expected to accept the legitimate authority of the state, to be law-abiding, to support the government in its rightful activities, and to be ready to defend the state if needed. It's really presented as a two-way street, a relationship of trust and duty. And remember that right we mentioned, the right of the destitute to be taken care of? Well, it's not just a nice thought. It's actually hardwired into the economic system. The state is responsible for collecting a specific mandatory charity called zakat from those who have wealth, and then distributing it to make sure there's a real social safety net. It makes fighting poverty an actual duty of the state. Okay, so we've looked at the laws, the government, the rights and responsibilities. Let's zoom back out for a second. What is the deep down, fundamental worldview that holds this entire blueprint together? This slide really brings it all home. The source material basically contrasts two completely different ways of looking at life. In the Islamic vision, this life and everything in it is a test. The ultimate goal isn't here and now, it's the hereafter, and all your actions are measured against a divine moral code. Contrast that with a materialist vision, where, if you can't see it, it doesn't exist. Life is all about material interests, and our actions are guided by whatever we desire, personally or as a group. And that takes us full circle, right back to the question I asked at the very beginning. This entire blueprint we've just walked through, from its source of law to its head of state to its social contract, it's all a direct consequence of its answer to the purpose of life. Which leaves us with a final thought to chew on. How does any society's answer to that one single question end up shaping absolutely everything else?